Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be in this fantastic country once again. Always, unfortunately, for work, always, unfortunately, way too quickly. But yesterday, I will confess that I did finally take time to go to the Blue Lagoon. A fantastic experience. If you have not done so, do not let yourselves go to the airport without going to the Blue Lagoon. One of the many wonderful experiences in this country. And since I have been here so many times, I actually I'm quite sure that I express the sentiments of all current generations in Iceland who are truly grateful for what previous generations did in the very visionary energy transformation that was started in Iceland 100 years ago. Today, we are talking about substituting coal and getting it out of the energy matrix. That was a path that Iceland started 100 years ago. 100 years ago, there was a very clear decision to substitute coal at that time for heating and cooking. Then, several years later, in the early 20th century, we began, I'm going to speak now as though I were Icelandic. I completely guarantee that I cannot speak a word of Icelandic, but I feel quite involved with this country because I come from Costa Rica, which has a very similar history to Iceland. So early in the 20th century, Iceland decided to begin to exploit its fantastic hydropower for electricity, and then in 1978 finally came to its geothermal potential for electricity, and now, of course, has combined heating and power. So a very pioneering country when it comes to energy. And what does that mean? What does those pioneering efforts mean for Iceland? Well, it means that Iceland and Costa Rica are the two countries that have 100% renewable energy and are actually recognized worldwide for that achievement. It also means that Iceland is recognized par excellence as the leader in geothermal technology and capacity, and it also means that Iceland has the lowest energy costs in Europe, if not in most of the world. It also means that this country with this amazing and very unique geology is capable not only of reducing its emissions, but actually producing negative emissions, because the geology, as we now know in Iceland, allows for the safe carbon and capture of CO2 into geological formations, such as is very difficult to find anywhere in the world. So all of that, good news for Iceland. Now, the bad news. The bad news for Iceland is the one that all of us see when we walk down the street. Have you noticed that almost every car in Iceland has an internal combustion engine that is burning fossil fuels, gasoline or diesel? I don't know if you know that 10% of all the imports of Iceland are actually refined petroleum. Now, my friends, to import refined petroleum into Iceland makes almost as much sense as importing fish into Iceland. Makes no sense whatsoever. Why, when the resource that we have in this country, clean, reliable, 24/7 energy, abundantly and cheaply, why are we spending expensive foreign currency to import fuel from other countries, making ourselves dependent on the willingness of other countries to export fuel to us? Does it make any sense in a world in which the geopolitics of energy is switching very, very quickly due to renewable domestic energies? My friends, it simply should no longer be acceptable. Frankly, the social license for fossil fuel burning vehicles, of which there are only 200,000 in Iceland, should quickly disappear. Yes, The charging infrastructure needs to be built up, but guess what? We will save a lot of money when we're not importing fossil fuels for transportation. I am not saying Iceland has a carbon neutral target for 2040. Excellent. I would say it can probably be reached before if we accelerate the electrification of mobility in Iceland. Yes, there are other areas, such as heavy industries, such as agriculture, that will need perhaps more thought and maybe more time. But electrifying mobility should be a no-brainer. And can you imagine, all of us, raise your hands if you're actually a visitor to Iceland, not living here. Okay, so about half of you. Now, can you imagine the experience that all of us who visit Iceland would have if we come to Iceland and we're invited to come to this wonderful country, not only because of its beautiful nature and very unique natural presentation, but also to experience what will be the future, which is 100% clean transportation. So that would mean changing all the buses. It would mean changing the vehicles. It would mean completely revolutionizing. Easy to do, my friends. Small is beautiful, and small is doable. Small is doable. In a country with 200,000 vehicles, this has got to be possible. Today, congratulations, Iceland. The first electric bus has been put on the streets of Iceland. Fantastic. Why only one? Data point, China puts 2,000 electric buses on its roads every week. Every week. Okay, so yes, China has a little few more people living in China than Iceland. I will admit that. But frankly, coming from a small country myself, we have to take advantage of all of the benefits of being a small economy. So small is beautiful, small is doable, and frankly, we should be able to move at least transportation over to zero emissions very quickly and enhance the tourist opportunity of all of us who visit Iceland, currently 2.2 million people, but many more if they know that not only are they coming to see the nature, but they're coming to experience what transportation is going to be like in this century. Enough said about Iceland. May I now move to the international perspective? Because as has been mentioned, I had the honor to direct the Paris Agreement. And let me summarize for those of you who have not memorized all 19 pages of the Paris Agreement. May I summarize it in 3 short statements? What is the Paris Agreement all about? It's about 3 things. Number 1, it's about the collective destination of carbon neutrality of the global economy, i.e. all countries of the world, no exceptions made, all countries by middle of the century. Secondly, it's about inviting every country to look at its opportunities and decide how, from their own sustainable development, from the point of view of strengthening their economy, they can contribute to that global effort. And thirdly, it's about sequentially increasing the ambition of all countries, because everything that was registered on the Paris Agreement in 2015 is frankly almost obsolete by now. China has overcomplied with what they said they were going to do in Paris. India has overcomplied. Most economies have actually already overcomplied because technology is moving forward very quickly, policy is moving forward, and capital is shifting. So we are decarbonizing the global economy in a way that is now unstoppable and irreversible. Now, does that mean that we're actually on track to keep the world under 2 degrees, well below under 2 degrees, to quote the Paris Agreement, or in fact head for 1.5, which is the maximum temperature range that would give any chance to the most vulnerable populations in all countries to survive? Well, in Germany, I spent a lot of time in Germany, There is a fantastic word that I hope exists in Iceland, but I don't know, which is jain, which means both yes and no in the same word. Does that exist in Icelandic? Does it? No? Yes? Oh, I see you're making up a word. Okay. Well, that's still okay. So the yes part of that is definitely that we are decarbonizing the global economy. The no part is that we're not doing so quickly enough. The science on climate change that has come out since the Paris Agreement, since 2015, says incontrovertibly, that we must put ourselves in the position by 2020 to reverse global trends of greenhouse gases, which are currently still on the up, reverse those and begin to come down by 2020 to stand any chance of being at a globally decarbonized economy by 2050. So my friends, that's 2 years' time. 2 years' time to change a trend in greenhouse gases that we've had for 100 years. Luckily, the technologies that are going to help to do that are actually growing exponentially, and so we have a chance. But because of that urgency, and I constantly invite everyone to swallow the alarm clock, because we know that climate is important, but how many of us are aware of the urgency of responding to climate? So do swallow the alarm clock. Remember, 2020, we have to begin to descend, peak emissions and descend. But what that actually means, that constraint, is a major clarion call to geothermal energy. A major. That is why there is a very important role for geothermal to play in worldwide. So while in the economy of Iceland and of Costa Rica, small is beautiful, that is absolutely true. But the other piece that we have to remember is that while small is beautiful, big is necessary. We cannot rely on transforming the economies only of small countries. We have to be there to transform the economies of large countries as well. What Iceland has done over the past 100 years should be seen as a microcosm of what needs to occur in the world over the next 5 to 10 years. That is the urgency that we have. And very specifically, I'm talking about the capacity that geothermal has to displace coal. Not everywhere, because we do not have the geothermal resource everywhere where coal is on the books, but there is a substantial overlap of countries that currently have new coal on the books. And there's a substantial overlap of those countries with untapped still geothermal resource. That is where we should be concentrating. In 2012, the world had 12% of energy of the world energy that was being produced. 12% was renewable. 2012. By 2013, we had jumped to 22%. The IEA, International Energy Agency, predicts that by 2020, we're going to be at 26%. I am trusting that the IEA is going to be wrong again, because they always underestimate the potential of renewable energy. And I am trusting that they have been wrong again, and that they have overestimated, because in order to be on track with the Paris Agreement, we would have to be at 30% renewable energy by 2020. So this is absolutely a race against new coal. And geothermal, as you all well know more than I, is the one energy source that can truly compete against coal, where that overlap is, obviously only where the resource is. But it is the renewable energy that is firm, that is reliable, that can be used as baseload. And we have heard from the head of JICA that we're only using a very small part of the potential of geothermal. There are some estimates that say that actually we could be using 16 times as much geothermal in the global energy mix. So How is it possible that we are holding ourselves back? We understand that renewable energies, solar and wind, need storage, and the investment into battery technology is currently occurring, but is not delivering results fast enough. Meanwhile, we have the largest self-replenishing battery in the world, known as geothermal energy. How are we not pairing those two things up? So, for baseload purposes, incontrovertible partnership. Secondly, certainly for some industries, because of the high energy yield and high temperature, something to be looked at, but fundamentally the third. For district heating, when you're talking no longer about high temperatures, but low temperatures. And as you well know, with the huge advantage that in most cases, in cases of cities that already exist and that have coal as the basis of their district heating, not only are those people dying because of the pollution, but the distribution system is already there. So it's just a question of changing the source of energy and eliminating coal and eliminating those absolutely horrible chimneys. That could be completely eliminated, clean the air, and improve the health. And that, of course, there's a huge opportunity for district heating from geothermal in Eastern Europe, as well as in China, whereas there's a huge potential for baseload electricity in Latin America and tropical Asia. So, my friends, there is frankly no stopping, no excuse is what I would like to say, no excuse for us as humanity to not use geothermal energy to its full potential and do so quickly. Yes, for high temperatures, there is high investment and there is some risk. But I guarantee that that investment and that risk is nothing compared to the cost and the risk of runaway climate change. Nothing compared to that. So I completely agree with the head of JICA. I do think that it is time to bring together our geothermal engineers and geologists together with the finance experts and come up with new financial instruments that are going to allow for the costs of exploration and to mitigate the risks of those. It is time to bring this solution. The world is looking every day more and more for low carbon solutions because there is a lack of clean energy. To sum up, I started by saying that this generation of Icelanders are very grateful to previous generations. True, but this generation of Icelanders cannot rest on the laurels of previous generations. In fact, current generations of Icelanders and of all other countries in the world have a huge responsibility toward future generations. We cannot turn this problem over to the next generations. So, my friends, I have two challenges for all of us. Number one, today, exactly in 2 years, exactly, April 26th of 2020, the World Geothermal Conference is going to be held here in Reykjavik. It's held every 5 years. The last time was 2015, same year as the Paris Agreement, and it will be held here in Reykjavik starting on April 26, 2020. By then, and we have exactly 2 years, I would like to make a double challenge. Number one, on April 26, 2020, Iceland should be well on its way to electrifying its entire fleet and be able to give the firm date by which internal combustion engine vehicles are banned in Iceland. My guess from the bottom of my ignorance, and I'm willing to be educated, is that that should be possible by 2025. So there you are, a nice little challenge for Iceland. Now, for the rest of you who come from other countries, another little challenge. Don't think you were going to get away without a challenge. No, everybody. So here is the challenge for everyone who works on geothermal. On April 26, 2020, we should have here in Reykjavik at the World Geothermal Conference, we should have at least 5 countries that come forward and explain exactly how they are substituting coal with geothermal for district heating, either for existing cities or for new cities. Did you know that 60% of the cities that we're going to need in this century have yet to be built? A huge opportunity there to do things right from the start. So my friends, may I just conclude by saying, frankly, the time for geothermal has come. It is a mature technology. We know the characteristics, both for high temperature as well as for low temperature, and those characteristics are frankly underappreciated and dramatically underutilized. So my invitation is, let's change that, and let's do so quickly. Thank you.